Hello and welcome to Sincerely Elvis Presley. I'm Sean. If you're new to the channel or if you're a regular viewer, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. Happy 90th birthday, Elvis. Wow, 90 years. It's difficult, isn't it, to picture what Elvis would have looked like as a 90-year-old had he not passed away in 77. It's, you see online some of these dodgy recreations, these aging things people use, but who knows what he'd have looked like had he survived. And this isn't just happy birthday to Elvis. As you'll have seen from the thumbnail, it's also a happy birthday to David Bowie, who would have been 78 today. I know over the years, quite a few venues have done joint nights for Elvis and Bowie's birthday as they share the same birthday. And personally, being a huge Elvis fan, January the 8th is obviously a significant event, but actually I'm also a huge David Bowie fan. So I've always been fascinated by the fact that these two artists who not only made an indelible impact on the world of music, but basically signified a seismic cultural shift. Elvis in the 50s, Bowie in the 70s, basically changed the world forever. And I find it fascinating. I'm not into astrology or anything like that, but I find it fascinating that you get two huge icons, and both of them embody the word icon, and they share the same birthday. But what I've also been fascinated with over the years is that the parallels and synergies between both Elvis and Bowie go quite a bit further than that. And I have mentioned a few times in comments and conversations I've had with subscribers that I was considering for a while doing a short episode on just that thing, the parallels between the two artists. And a few people said, oh, that would be quite interesting, I'd quite like that. So I've toyed with the idea for a while, and I thought, what better time to do it than both of theirs birthday, and especially such a significant birthday as Elvis's 90th. So let's start with the birth date itself. Now, Bowie said, Elvis was a major hero of mine, and I was probably stupid enough to believe that having the same birthday as him actually meant something. Well, they went on to have such huge careers and such a huge impact. I mean, just look at record sales. Elvis, conservative estimates put his record sales at over 1 billion, but David Bowie's no slouch in the same region. His sales are over 100 million, which is a fairly significant number, I think you'll agree. And let's start right at the beginning then. So they were both born on the same date. Elvis, obviously, in 1935, Bowie in 1947. Now, Bowie said that the reason that he was inspired to go into music because he saw his cousin Christina dancing along to Hound Dog. I think this would probably be in 56, not too long after it had been released. And it was that, watching the joy she got and joining in with her that made him think, that I'd like to do that. I'd like to make music. So there's your starting block. So move along a little bit. And when David Bowie gets signed to a major label, what label does he get signed to? Only RCA, isn't it? I mean, I remember the first Bowie album I bought was Scary Monsters, and I got that. It came out in 1980, and I didn't get it till a couple of years later. But I remember when I first got the album out, and there staring at me was the orange RCA Victor label. It was like deja vu from my Elvis collection, So you've got the fact that both of these huge artists share the same birthday, and they end up on the same record label. Now, there's an interesting story that happens when Bowie is first signed to RCA, and I'll try and get that here. So this came from Bowie's wife, Angie Bowie. So it said that RCA were kind of bending over backwards to smooch him, if you like. And it says when we walked into our room at the Plaza, so they'd gone over to New York, and an impressive enough experience itself, and saw that the record company people had done all this for us, decked it out beautifully, piled on the bed, and all around it were wrapped presents. All David's RCA promotional material, the whole album catalogue that year, plus the entire Elvis back catalogue. So that's the way RCA welcomed Bowie into the States and into their world, was by giving him Elvis's entire back catalogue, albums and what have you. So I thought that was interesting, and it was as a result of that kind of smooching and keeping him sweet to sign this contract, or he just signed the contract, that they arranged for him to go to Madison Square Garden to see Elvis. Now, I've shared, when I covered the FTD Elvis at Madison Square Garden book, I did make a reference to the section that talks about David Bowie sees Elvis at Madison Square Garden. But you get this piece. This was a quote from Bowie in '96. Elvis was a major hero of mine. I came over for a long weekend. I remember coming straight from the airport and walking into Madison Square Garden very late. I was wearing all my clobber from the Ziggy period and had great seats near the front. The whole place just turned to look at me, and I felt like a right idiot. I had brilliant red hair, some huge padded spacesuit, and those red boots with big black soles. I wish I'd gone for something quiet, because I must have registered with him. He was well into his set by then. And I think actually what had happened is Bowie had been promised by RCA that they would arrange a meeting at Madison Square Garden that night, but he was then told that couldn't be arranged and it wasn't going to happen. So that's Bowie in his formative period, going to see sort of Elvis kind of at his peak, I guess. Now, it's interesting that shortly after that, very shortly after that, Bowie makes what would be a cataclysmic appearance on Top of the Pops in the UK. 6th of July 1972, he performs Starman, and basically shocks a conservative British nation by throwing his arms around guitar player Mick Ronson. And it's strange to look back now how that could have been such a major event, but seeing somebody that wasn't afraid of his sexuality, that wasn't afraid to embrace a fellow male, was shocking to a nation that was still very conservative, and it sort of it changed a lot of things for a lot of people. And I think that's quite an interesting parallel. So you've got, Bowie makes a huge impact from a television appearance, and it wasn't his television debut. He'd been on TV before, but there's something about his performance that night, and he almost calculates that performance. There's a point where he says, and he looks at you, and he points directly down the camera as if he's looking at the audience and talking to them. It's very, very clever. Now, if you parallel that with Elvis, look at the Milton Berle show, June the 5th, 1956, when he performs Hound Dog in a sort of gyrating, suggestive way that he hadn't really been seen doing to that extent on television before. In the same way that Bowie used television, I think Elvis used television that night. He plays to it. He teases the audience. He knows by then exactly what he's doing. And again, that has a cataclysmic effect, and he's on everybody's lips the following day. So, you've got both artists that appeared on television before. Both artists became more comfortable with that medium. And then there was this one time when both of them used that medium to dramatic, huge effect, and kind of shocked the respective nations that it was broadcast in. So I think that's a nice little parallel to go. And actually, when I talked about Mick Ronson, there's another thing there. You could say that both Elvis and Bowie, when they made their initial impact, they were both backed up by a fantastic genius guitarist that almost became their right-hand man. So Elvis starts with Scotty Moore, Bowie has Mick Ronson, and both of them are sort of important to the formulation of that sound and how that sound comes across in those early years. So I think there's a parallel there. And you can go further, actually, throughout their careers. both of them were so intuitive and so in tune to what they wanted to create, what they heard in their head and what they wanted to deliver, that they were smart enough to always surround themselves with the very best musicians that were around, so that they could translate, you know, their artistic vision and make it sound brilliant. So they were both really smart where it came to that as well. So this is early 70s. You know, let's talk about David Bowie and Aladdin Sane, an iconic album cover where he chooses to present himself on the front cover of the album with the lightning bolt across his face, and that lightning bolt kind of becomes forever etched in. It's an iconic cover for sure, but it kind of becomes associated with Bowie forever, that lightning bolt and that image. And that's 1973. If we go back to 1970, who else is coming up with a lightning bolt that he wants to use? Well, it's Elvis and his TCB logo, you know. And let's face it, now that lightning bolt has become that TCB logo with the lightning bolt has become associated with Elvis. So both men, from completely different circumstances, but in a very close time frame, both use lightning bolt imagery in one way or another, and both end up becoming associated with that lightning bolt. So, you know, there's a nice little synergy there. So that's Bowie in 73. By 75, we get an interesting story where he's approached by his record company to write a song for Elvis. That's what he's asked to do. And he writes a song called Golden Years, which later in 76 becomes a huge hit for him. Now there's a couple of different stories about Golden Years. One story says that his wife Angie Bowie was enlisted to take it to Elvis and got too nervous, so it never made it to him. But Bowie himself in 2002 says this: "There was talk between our offices that I should be introduced to Elvis and maybe start working with him in a production writer capacity, but it never came to pass. I would have loved to have worked with him. God, I would have adored it." So in that same interview, Bowie said that the song did make it through to Tom Parker potentially, but whatever happened, it got rejected, and it obviously, we know it never got recorded. Bowie himself records it for 76. It appears on his Station to Station album that year and becomes a huge hit. But imagine, I don't know, you know, it's quite a funky song, and I just think if you listen, Elvis in 75, if this was when it was presented, and if Elvis did get to actually hear it, we don't know. Got to hear the demo. But I can't imagine Elvis recording Bowie's Golden Years in 75. You know, we've got that recording session that the Today album comes from, Sunset Boulevard, and that's very countrified. So I can't see Golden Years working at all in that context or at those sessions. But you could fast forward to 76 to the sessions in the Jungle Room, and Elvis was experimenting with stuff like, Way Down to me always has a real disco propulsion to it that he hadn't really used before. And actually, I think I can hear him doing Golden Years in the Jungle Room. I think I can hear him recording it. You know, that would have been amazing. Obviously, we know it didn't happen. But there's an interesting bit at the end of this. Apparently, Bowie said in the same interview that Elvis sent him a note saying, "All the best and have a great tour." And Bowie kept that note with him for the rest of his life. So I think that's really nice that, you know, it seems as if there was some kind of acknowledgement there from Elvis in some way or another. If anyone has any more information on any of this, please do let me know in the comments. I'm just coming up with what I can find, and I think, you know, I think there's quite a lot. There's that story. We know that story has elements of truth. Bowie Bowie in his very early years was quite a great exaggerator when it came to interviews, but as he moved on in years, sort of through the 90s onwards, he just became a fantastic raconteur in interviews, and I don't think he exaggerated things. He just told it like it was. So I've no doubt that happened. That Golden Years rumor had happened, it had been going on for years, and he kind of just confirmed it and said, well, it was something to do with RCA, which is conceivable. You know, RCA were desperate to get Elvis to record stuff. Bowie was hot property in the mid-70s. It was on fire in the 70s. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility at all that they'd have thought, well, there's an opportunity there. What is beyond the realms of possibility? I think after Bowie had passed, the tabloids, certainly in the UK, got hold of this story from Dwight Yoakam, claiming that Bowie had told him that Elvis had approached him in 77 to be his producer. Now, I think what that must have been was him reading some of this stuff and kind of appropriating it into a different story, because there's no way Elvis was approaching Elvis didn't approach anyone to be his producer, let's face it. There's certainly no way he was doing that in 77 when he wasn't recording and had no intentions to record. The only way that could be true, I guess, would be, we know that there were serious plans afoot for Elvis to come to the UK in 1978. There's various stories of advance plans being made for transport and what have you. Now, if that's the case and that was being planned, could he have foreseen some kind of recording sessions in London, maybe in 78? Possibly, but I don't think there's much credence in that Dwight Yoakam story. For a start, I can't see David Bowie confided in Dwight Yoakam. I mean, they weren't, as far as I know, they had no connection whatsoever. So that seems a little bit odd and a little bit fanciful. There's probably about as much truth to that as the rather bizarre Tommy Steele story about Elvis coming to London and going out secretly with him when he was discharged from the army. I don't think so. But you know, nevertheless, you know, I think there's an amalgam of things going on there of what's true and what isn't true. So we move on to the 90s, and Bowie records, he's got a project called Tin Machine, and records a song released as a single called You Belong in Rock and Roll. Now, if you get a chance to, have a listen to that, because clearly if you listen to the breathed vocals and the way he delivers it, he's definitely channeling Elvis to a certain degree in there. And then we jump forward to 1996, and Bowie provides the soundtrack for a television adaptation of Hanif Kureishi's The Buddha of Suburbia. And in that, the title song is called Buddha of Suburbia. And there's a line in it which says, Elvis is English and climbs the hill. Quite what he meant by that, we don't know, because Bowie was quite often cryptic with his lyrics, but he definitely categorically name checks Elvis in that track. Now, on the 25th anniversary of Elvis's passing, Bowie is performing at the George Amphitheatre in Washington. And on that night, he chooses to come back on stage with an encore and do a couple of Elvis songs to mark the 25th anniversary of Elvis's passing. Now, Bowie was a huge, huge music fan. And when he did cover versions, he would often draw out the unexpected, the obscure, the lesser known kind of tracks from rock and roll's great heritage, rock music's great heritage. And it was no exception. When he did the two Elvis songs on the 25th of August 2002, he pulled out I Feel So Bad. Now that's not, your standard Elvis hit that everyone knows. He also does One Night, which is more popular, but yeah, he does I Feel So Bad. This, if you can find it, I'm sure it's out there. It's probably even on YouTube. There are recordings of that performance, but I thought that was quite a nice little nod towards what was clearly a hero of his. Now, we've got another connection. We've got the connection with Lisa Marie. Now, we know that Bowie first encountered her at least in 1991, may have met her earlier than that, but we've got photographic evidence of them meeting in 1991. And they also met subsequent times after that. In fact, Lisa Marie said in an interview that Bowie came to a concert of hers and she was wowed because she was such a huge fan. And he spoke to her, and she said that she almost felt that he wanted to take a kind of mentor role because her father wasn't there to advise her, someone that had been through the music industry. And she said that he gave her a lot of really valuable advice. So I thought that was quite sweet, that he took the opportunity to, give her a bit of advice from someone who'd obviously been around the block in the music industry and knew the pitfalls. So yeah, you've got the Lisa Marie angle. Now, what else have I got here? Because I've been jotting this down for a couple of weeks now. Right, let's just look at, without too much detail, a kind of list of the things that you could compare between the two. So they're both incredibly striking looking individuals, and they both had an innate sense of style and fashion and could carry off pretty much anything, even if you go for the fact that both of them were kind of known throughout the world by a single name, Elvis and Bowie, and instantly recognisable by that name to anyone in the world. Both of them had movie careers. Both of them, moved away from just recording music and moved into the acting genre. Now, this is another one that's an interesting one. Both of them really had Svengali-like controlling managers. Colonel Tom Parker and Tony DeFries, David Bowie's manager throughout the 70s. And both of those managers, controversially, took huge amounts from their artists. In fact, both of them ended up taking 50% of the artist's earnings. So there's a real synergy there. Now, fortunately, Bowie got wise to what was happening with Tony DeFries and got rid of him. We know that Elvis knew what was going on with Parker and tried to get rid of him, but unfortunately that never transpired and it didn't happen. But yeah, I thought that was interesting that they both had those controlling managers. Now, both of these two artists, these fantastic artists, appeared on concerts, famous concerts, groundbreaking famous concerts that were transmitted across the world. Elvis, obviously, with Aloha from Hawaii via satellite, David Bowie in Live Aid. So you've got that. You've got the fact that both of them recorded perennial Christmas favourites that's still adored and played at Christmas these days. Elvis with Blue Christmas, David Bowie along with Bing Crosby with Peace on Earth and Little Drummer Boy. So there's that as well. What else we've got? Oh, well, both of them had ex-wives who kept hold of the famous surname and made money by telling tales of their marriage to their ex-husbands and wrote books about them. And I suppose really, the other sad thing that relates the two of them is they both died suddenly and their deaths shocked the world. I think they do have that in common. And that kind of brings me to the kind of final point I just wanted to make about these two incredible artists and some of the parallels and crossovers between their lives and careers. David Bowie, when he died, released the incredible album Black Star. Now, he was dying of cancer and he used Black Star to, as a kind of metaphor for his illness. There's all sorts of layers within it, and that was typical of Bowie's work. But the black star can be seen as the cancer itself. There was some reference to the lesions that appear on x-rays, or black star to do with his mortality, with his death, all sorts of things. He basically turned his death into art. This album was released just 2 days before he passed, and it really is an incredibly powerful work. But there's the other piece, the connection with Elvis. We know that Elvis originally recorded Flaming Star for the movie of the same name as Black Star, because it was going to be called Black Star. And the whole thing about Black Star is every man has a black star over his shoulder, and when a man sees his black star, he knows his time has come. So in the movie, it becomes the flaming star of death that signals it's time for him to go into the hills and die. But before that was rewritten, it was Black Star. Now, we know that Bowie loved music for music's sake. He adored it, and he often went for the obscure. We saw that when I talked about him covering Elvis on the 25th anniversary of death. He chose I Feel So Bad. And it's highly, highly likely to me that he knew about the existence of Black Star being the original version of Flaming Star. And for me, that's too much of a coincidence. Black Star is about a man dying, about seeing that black star and knowing it's time to go, which is the whole point of the Black Star album for Bowie. So I think it's too much of a coincidence. I think that's kind of a final statement and the final thing that brings the two of them together, which I think it's extraordinary. I do. I think it's absolutely extraordinary that these two people that had such an effect on the world we live in not only shared the same birthday, but there's that thing at the end that brings them together. It blows me away. There's probably more comparisons. I mean, there are some rare records that I know some of you out there, the Elvis collectors among you, I don't know if you've got or seen these, but we have this particular one here is Space Oddity by Bowie and Fool by Elvis. This was released in 1972 in Thailand. So you've got a single there with those pair on, and then you've got this one from May 1973 in Italy. We've got Steamroller Blues by Elvis on one side and Let's Spend the Night Together by Bowie on the other side. So there you go. Two singles, one with Elvis on one side, one with Bowie on the other. But we've even got this. Now this is an album made for Armed Forces Radio. And on one side you've got Bowie's Fame and Fashion, David Bowie's all-time greatest hits. And on the other side you've got Elvis's Gold Records Volume 5. Now this was released in the US in 1985. So you've even got like three rarities there that have Elvis on one side and Bowie on the other. So, I don't know. Hopefully, I just thought it was a bit of fun to celebrate both of their birthdays. If you think of any more things I've forgotten, let me know in the comments. If you got any thoughts, hopefully it was some kind of food for thought for you. But all that remains for me to say is, Elvis and David, happy birthday. You are the most incredible and inspiring artists that really have had a huge effect on my life, and I adore the pair of you. So happy birthday from the bottom of my heart.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.